On episode 27 of Around the Coin, Mike Townsend, Brian Romley, and Faisal Khan predict the future of payments in social media with Twitter buying CardSpring, Snapchat payments, and Facebook's new buy button for one-click buying as well.
All right, good morning, guys. Brian, Faisal, another exciting episode. We'll be talking about a bit of Twitter and Snapchat, Facebook, Bitcoin. How are you guys doing?
Awesome.
Doing good.
Awesome. Exciting week, huh?
Lots of news.
Yes, interesting week. And payments all kind of hit at once.
I know. The story that stuck out to me was Twitter's acquisition of CardSpring.
Yeah, it's a really big deal. Really big deal. I think it may very well portend the future of where Twitter needs to be to really monetize the platform. I think, as all of us can agree upon, payments are really about a relationship. And, they're torts, they're contracts, they're agreements to do X for Y. And they obviously have an ancient founding. So in a modern context, disconnecting the relationship from payments, on the internet especially, it became a bit of a problem. The card didn't really do very well becoming virtual in the internet space. And I think we're coming full circle with a communication capability. And a lot of people see that as quote unquote person to person versus person to business and et cetera. I don't see a distinction. I don't think money cares whether it's going to pay your buddy for the atypical, or for the atypical splitting of the check, or a merchant for doing X, Y, Z. And I think when we try to quantify that, and we've talked about this many times in the shows, we create categories that really frustrate innovation and creativity. So we take a step back and we say, well, what is Twitter trying to do? Well, I think Twitter's trying to save its life is really what I think it's trying to do. In any type of product like this, its beauty of its simplicity actually becomes its own demise. The 140 character limitation was nice for period X, but by period Y, it will become irrelevant. Artificial limitations on human creativity has always failed in life. And we could take a step back and say constraint makes valuable contributions, not long term. Nature doesn't like constraints very long. It finds a way around it and it expands. So one of the expansions, of course, was video. First with Twitter was images. At first, you can't have an image on Twitter. We're not even going to support that.
Right.
Then now we want video. Well, first with images, there was this acquisition that was going to take place called Instagram, and that was swapped away from Twitter at the very last second. And then somebody created the short form video, which I think is an irrelevant concept in historical perspective. Historically, probably our kids will look back and laugh at us for even trying to make such a ridiculous, purposeful constraint, as if the constraint itself would edit us to do something more profound. I don't see it that way. I see in these types of cases, it doesn't create more profoundness. It creates more ridiculousness. I look at most of your Vines and your looping videos. They're ridiculous. It's a time waste.
Sure. So, Faisal, do you think that each one of these companies eventually in the next few years will have the ability to pay very easily and seamlessly through Snapchat, Twitter, Facebook?
I think for any instant messaging platform, payments would probably be the natural extension. Having said that, Twitter is somewhat of a puzzle. I just don't understand how you could natively pay with a tweet. And if we were to take that example, paying each other natively with a tweet. If you want to embed, for example, referral or affiliate programs, that can be done. But paying natively, I haven't figured that out. I'm sure these guys would have, but I think it'll be a natural extension. Sure, why not?
I think CardSpring is the example of one of the directions it's going to go in. CardSpring spent a great deal of time working at the back end of payments to try to decode who the cardholder is and what their affiliations are with with certain merchants and whether or not they're part of a discount program or a frequent buyer program, miles program. It sounds like it all ought to be simple, but it's an amazingly complex problem. A problem that they didn't fully solve. They didn't have 100% capability of real-time connections between.
And Brian, how do they do that? So how does, if you were to describe how Mogul or Belly, when you go into a company, a merchant, and you use your credit card, how do they identify that is you?
Well, they're using a different schema, if you will. They're overlaying their own system on top of the existing payment system, and then somehow affiliating your card with that transaction. That requires a prior relationship. CardSpring theoretically could, if they had more agreements and more affiliations. I know that they were affiliated with First Data, and I think in retrospect, First Data made a big mistake not acquiring the company entirely. I don't understand that. Or some other companies that would have made a much better potential. In fact, even a wild card here, Discover American Express acquiring that company would have been a profound shift in the environment. And I don't say that lightly. I was actually part of a research study conducted independently, but it wound up in the hands of maybe one of the companies that is mentioned as a potential acquisition. And it was too off the wall for them. Now I think it's probably that executive is long gone because these companies move through executives in the 3-year cycle. And, but it probably would have been a good idea now, but too late. So what's going on is you're looking at back-end systems, and you can't really do it in real time. You can do it in sort of a batch type of setting where the merchant is giving you raw card data in a PCI protected type of environment, and in some way processing that and saying, oh, that's John Smith. John Smith signed up for the affiliate program. So it's an affiliate, or not, let's call it an affinity program is really the best terminology. And in that affinity program, it could be frequent miles, discounts, all sorts of miles.
Sure, but specifically the ability to look at that transaction, identify maybe the encrypted token that passes through the, say the 500 scanner, whatever they're using to swipe the credit card, and then that comes back to the merchant and comes back to Mogul, BellyUp, whoever the card analytics platform is, and reads that as a transaction. So it's kind of I remember talking to someone over at Groupon when they were looking at this and how they can integrate it, and it's a fairly sophisticated problem.
Yes, it is.
Which is interesting. But I think the reason Twitter acquired CardSpring is not really payments. I think it's the back-end analytics behind that. For every transaction, I don't think Twitter has difficulty building in the payment system. I think and they're not going to use CardSpring's technology to do that. But what they will do is use their analytics back-end platform, right? Like the ability to keep track of like loyalty and receipts and various commerce interfaces for both Twitter and users.
I think it's more subtle than that. I think what they need to do is give people a reason to be on the Twitter platform. Okay, I've been traveling a lot, and I go to different parts of the country that are not very sophisticated in technology like we would find in the Bay Area and some technology centers. And Twitter is completely misunderstood by a vast majority of people I come across. And it's hard for most people in technology to grok this. Even its distractors have a problem understanding just how profoundly misunderstood Twitter is. And that problem is never going to solve itself by getting people to use it, because the entry into using Twitter even is more monumental than trying to understand it. So it's an enigma inside of a mystery to people. But if you have a reason, if we look at Foursquare, the premise was if you check in, you're going to get a discount, right? And you're going to potentially get a discount. That was the premise. You could be a mayor, and it was all very low key, and let's not push people. If you look at the platforms that have been successful, they're pretty hardcore. I mean, Starbucks makes it very clear what their star is moving along your screen if you've used their rewards app, essentially their wallet. The premise is I'm getting something by using this. So Twitter needs to do that. They need to monetize in a sense that they need to activate consumers, but more importantly, merchants. The merchant would want to drive somebody to utilize this system.
Sure, but I think that's for any platform where you have intense communication, especially really lightweight, quick transactions, high frequency throughout the entire day. I mean, to me, that's fertilizer for an awesome payment system, right? Because if you were say you're raising money for a soccer team, right? And you had a hashtag out there that people could just hashtag and donate the number afterwards, right? And of course you have like, yeah, I approve this, and you pay $3 or some cause you read about, lions in Africa being, shot, and you want to, donate money, or, there's a million use cases, but I think the ability to give microtransactions, not necessarily under $1, but just high frequency, small amount of transactions, it's usually kind of a shitty experience. If you're on a website, it's an individual platform. You have to go through either PayPal or some other payment system. It's not fluid. And I think that's probably what Twitter looks at and says, can we build a super fluid experience where throughout your day, as you're walking to a coffee shop, you can literally donate a couple bucks to some organization or person that you want. And also discover it, right? Discover and contribute to it. And I think that's a big idea. Hopefully, Faisal, they can make this international and actually expand it. But I'm sure first step, as with most of these, will be US based. Is there anything out there, Faisal? Have you seen anything that resembles Twitter outside the US that has significant traction? Maybe, I know China has their own example of one.
Well, China is the only one that I can think of, and that's in WeChat. They have a native method of paying anyone. So,
and how does that work? Do you think Twitter will emulate some of their decisions?
Not sure, because WeChat is basically you're associating a bank account and you're loading it into your wallet. It's a wallet in its classical definition. So you're just paying through wallet to wallet, and that's how WeChat works. But in Twitter, I don't know how a wallet would be implemented. I've tried to think of ways how Twitter could be used. I mean, one method would be paying someone via a private message, a DM, a direct message, or pay someone via a regular tweet with the confirmation to complete the transaction coming in through a direct message, and you click on it or something like that. But again, like you said, it's not fluid, it's not smooth. It's still, really, is that it?
Let me give you a little element, and again, this company's not talked about very much in the TechCrunch cocktail circuit. But Shopkick, all right, what's the most popular app-based reward system outside of Starbucks? It's Shopkick. They have Macy's. They have some of the largest retailers in the country participating in the program. Part of the problem,
however, that doesn't indicate traction.
Well, of course not. But you have to ask yourself year after year if these companies can consistently and continually participate. Macy's has been doing this for 5 years. All right, so it's not like it's going away. It's growing. In fact, I was at I don't get to go to the mall very often because I don't find a use for it. But traveling around the country, I go to the mall, and I've seen a lot of moms popping out their Shopkick at Macy's and a few other stores. I actually had a makeshift study I was doing because I was bored waiting at the mall. And I asked, I think about 12, it was 12. Yeah, it was 12 people are working around the mall. And I asked them about the use of Shopkick in this part of the East Coast.
I could actually just picture that. Brian's wife just shopping and Brian frustrated doing surveys about payment companies.
It's worse than that. It's taking my 5-year-old with me and using him as the cute guy. No, it's fun and they love it. But I don't get to be around Virginia, D.C., Maryland area very often, and although it's not. This particular study, if you will, is not like indicative of other things I've seen in the country, but it does reflect upon it. There is a tech center here, of course, but you are seeing a high usage of Shopkick. One checkout person was telling me that they, in fact, expect that about 60% of their purchases at their counter has a Shopkick component. And I said, well, do you use it? Of course. And I said, is it popular here? Every one of the woman that I was interviewing there is a mom, and she goes, every one of the moms she knows has the app. And I go, how about Starbucks? And she pulls out her phone, shows her Starbucks app. So, technology is integrating. But, there is that frustration. I said, what's wrong with the app? Well, you got to remember it. And I go, and I go, is there times you don't use it? Yeah, I forget, things like that. So signaling is a problem. And iBeacons may fix that. CardSpring is attaching this problem from another standpoint rather than front loading the problem. They're doing ex post facto. They're really analyzing the data afterwards. Rewards pull people in. There's no doubt about it. From the very early Sperry and Hutchison S&H green stamp, 87% of the population of the United States in the 1940s participated in S&H green stamps. This is a profoundly important thing. You can get human behavior to change if the motivation is there. And this was tantamount to more than just cognitive load. It was mechanical load. You had to get the stamp, cut it. At first, they weren't even perforated. You had to cut it.
And but I thought the whole point of the ShopKit was they had the high frequency sound waves. So you don't have to remember.
Yeah, you do have to remember because you have to present your phone within a reasonable distance for it to work.
But they remind you.
It doesn't always work. But what my point is to drive people into an economy. This was the problem that Square has seen. This is a problem that everybody with a wallet has seen. You just don't drop a wallet out there or quote unquote a new way to pay, and then people just, oh yeah, I love that. You have to create the pretense for it. And I'm not saying that this is a perfect science, and I'm not even saying that CardSpring is the right solution for Twitter. If you were to pay me a lot of money, I would probably break it down and show you that CardSpring probably wasn't the best way to approach this. It certainly looks that way. And again, being a data scientist and being a researcher, you want to, and I work in this field, right? You want to say that the data and the science behind it is what really is driving it. And unfortunately, that's put in the cart before.
Yeah, but I don't think
the behavior aspect.
I don't think it's that complex. I really think that all Twitter and Snapchat and Facebook are going to do is they're going to look at their existing experience. So people and brands promote on Twitter. They have a whole ad section where if I'm a shoe company, I can go on there and promote to people who are tweeting about shoes and their friends and things like that. So what they'll do is they'll make it very easy for me to transact and buy that product via Twitter, right? I don't necessarily think they're going to make a peer-to-peer transaction or think that they'll become valuable there, right? That's kind of already done in a big way. It's very easy to do that. At least, with Venmo, they make it very easy to do that in other companies. But to pay for something on Twitter doesn't exist, right? And pay for something on Facebook doesn't exist easily, or Snapchat. So I think that's where, if you look at Snapchat's filing of their trademark around payments, I think that's kind of what they're getting at. Is we want to make it easy for brands to promote and consumers to purchase on our platform, right? That I think is where the dollars start rolling in.
Well, Snapchat is a different component because it's going after an entirely different demographic. And in fact, if you really want to analyze it from a demographic standpoint, being at a couple of Warped Tour dates, quite a few of them actually, I'm seeing a cross-section of people who really are going to influence the behavior, a lot of teens and preteens. And Snapchat is profoundly more involved in their daily life, and so is Instagram. Facebook is only a directory service for them because their parents are on it, and Twitter doesn't exist in their world. They don't even, most of the youth I come across don't even see a reason for Twitter to exist. They don't feel like they can interact with their celebrities through Twitter because they don't frankly believe that they're really talking to their celebrity. So that element, the Ashton Kutcher, element of a past generation is gone with that. So, inside of Snapchat, you might ask yourself, what would somebody do? Well, it was funny when I heard about the trademark filing. I happened to be with a rather up and coming band, and I said, "What would it mean to your band if Snapchat had a payment built into it?" And he's a lead singer. He's 19 years old, and immediately it occurred to him exactly. He goes, I can get more support from my fans through here. We can do quick makeshift performances because they know that, again, this is not any secret. Snapchat is going to get more intensely involved with celebrity videos and extended short form, if you will, probably 3 to 9 minute video loops, which would be perfect for a music promotion platforms. So there are some that believe that if you're an artist and you're looking for music distribution, which is challenged today, a platform like Snapchat could own that. And Twitter had the opportunity to own that, but because of what I said before, the artificial psychological constraint of saying, let's make everything too very small and cute and very Zen-like, that actually created this need to find other forms of expression. Currently, it's YouTube. And again, Google could have done incredible on this, but again, the
well,
people
Google's
that are
problem is you have to use the platform in order to make it an effective payment system. Google Plus is not going to be.
But it's so non-intuitive to the artist, right?
Sure.
So, so I could see that connection, and I could tell you, being in LA and working around a lot of people that have connections with Snapchat, they're absolutely looking at that. Now that has a MySpace component, an MP3.com component. I mean, these are prior incarnation of music promotion systems. But let's look at what made MySpace. It was the music. What killed MySpace was the constraint within that system. And Facebook never took that mantle over. They just took the social element aspect over.
Yeah, I work with the ex-CEO of MySpace, and hearing some of the horror stories around that, early monetization, I think downward pressure.
It was terrible. Yeah. But if you talk to them, it really was the music. Yeah. And Twitter had the aspect for a very brief period of time with the celebrity connection. Instead, that artificial limitation of 140 characters, please don't give me video, actually destroyed it. And I think I don't believe it's going to monetize back. I think the kids are already the kids.
Yeah, we'll say the kids. Faisal, what do you think around the Facebook moves as of late?
That's a fantastic thing that they've rolled out. Just I think on the 17th they rolled out a very limited buy button that you can place for businesses, being able to purchase within Facebook, not having to leave, all the promises of the credit card data not to be shared with anyone else. It'll be secure, etc. So I think this is a natural extension of what is going to happen on Facebook, which is commerce. Commerce that is driven by Facebook, that is collected by Facebook. And in some, I guess, speculative manner, one could say, I don't know if it's even correct to say this, that, is this David Marcus showing up very, in a very subtle fashion on Facebook with his payment mechanism? Who knows? Even though he's meant for a messenger, but it is something that had to come and is slowly now coming out.
It's interesting, Faisal. You brought up David Marcus, and when I saw that, I had seen the early incarnations of the buy button, and and I saw some of the screenshots of some of the tests of how the transaction flow was taking place. And I was overcome with the notion that the people putting it together really weren't, very experienced with how payments could, the whole process of payments could really slow down a transaction and let somebody have the dreaded abandoned shopping cart scenario. From what I can see with this new version, it seems like it's a highly massaged version of that. And I think it's no accident that Dave is there at the time this is taking place. Mm-hmm. I think we're seeing the beginnings of testing. This is going to be a Goliath. And I think if they continue to move consistently in the direction that they are, their footprint can be very much the way Apple's footprint is, and could invalidate a lot of industries,
It almost brings me to that one-click checkout at Amazon, and this buy button could just pretty much be the same thing. It's native to my Facebook experience, my user experience with Facebook. It doesn't stand out or create or make me think. It's very native because the like button was there. Now we just have a buy button, and there's a financial consequence of clicking it.
But let's compare and contrast your experience, and you get this really well, Faisal. I think you're probably one of the earliest people that saw the potential in payments within Facebook. But compare that to the Twitter experience versus the Facebook experience. If you look at how people recommend and like things versus how things are retweeted, there's a more natural process within the much more open platform that Facebook has built to access payments and to make purchasing more logical on that platform. It is much more robust. It is easier for a retailer to grok, and
if you get any sort of a viral, growth with it, and shares and so forth, it's just massive. I think if you look at Shopify came up with a Facebook platform, and one of the things they kept sort of drumming into everyone's head was it's the same way that you share a video, like share an image or picture, what have you. And the entire packaged information about what you were trying to sell, the specifications, the checkout experience, the price, the discount, all gets shared automatically, very seamlessly, without leaving Facebook, without having to implement an app. And the checkout is within Facebook itself. And
this is powerful. Yeah.
And lo and behold, now Facebook themselves have something like this. So,
Now, I think part of it will be you'll never look at your phone again and not have the option to buy something. Like open up Twitter and open up Facebook or Snapchat or Amazon obviously is built around it, but these other companies aren't, right? They're built around like communications at various levels, right? Various intensity levels. Facebook a little bit more so. You're right. You're maybe more engaged than you are. Twitter, you can kind of turn on and off in a second. But I think anytime you see a product recommended by a friend, or you even see a sponsored product by a company individually, you'll never not have that button there. Right. And we're going to look back and say, like, God, can you imagine Facebook? And if they took away the ability to buy anything I see on the page, like it almost is like prehistoric that you can't do it now.
I'll sort of term it following way. If you look at human behavior, and let's say you have human behavior starting from a frequency called 0 all the way to 100. Typically, when we had cash, we were only touching a few frequencies. There's so much different type of behaviors that simply are not being translated into payments right now, being able to tip electronically, being able to do microtransactions. So I think the concert that we're seeing is a very, weird concert because so many frequencies are missing in payments. And I think everyone wants to turn up the frequency that they have access to, have access to being able to pay through social media, have access to be able to pay by touching a phone or by communicating with someone or just by walking into a place. These are all the frequencies, that are specifically coming up, and the spectrum eventually will be lighted completely and you'll be able to see the entire concert in play, I think one of the most important things is right now, people are saying, well, listen, we have such a huge user base. Surely, and I'm sure they have done their surveys and, all those tests, etc. But they see a huge market where a certain payment requirement is in need. It doesn't have to be a product, doesn't have to be a service that's sold. It could just be loaning a buck or two. It could just be, every like gets 1 cent. Every retweet would get quarter a cent, whatever it is. But these are payment cases that are just waiting to be made.
Faisal.
It's fun because you can now be creative, right? Like all of those ideas you rattle off in 2 seconds, there's hundreds more, but there's just not the ability. The Lego pieces are not in place. But once they are.
Faisal points out something that I've always had an affinity to, and that's the ability to transmit microtransactions to anybody in the world instantly. And I've speculated ever since I saw the like button, how much is a like worth? And if you're a business and you become viral, I'm not saying that you necessarily use the like button and the ability to send somebody a microtransaction as the only motivation, but wouldn't it be nice that you could compensate people for that like, and isn't that appropriate?
I'll give you an example. I have a friend of mine, and he has 10,000 or maybe 12,000 URLs, basically web URLs, saved that are specifically related to the travel industry.
Wow.
And obviously these are not his, they belong to people, but he's curated them. He says, what is the payment mechanism for being appreciated financially for curating something?
There isn't any.
There is none. He says, how cool would it be if I share within a specific vertical, could be travel, could be education, could be physics, could be music, could be piano learning, could be whatever. And if you share the relevant curated articles, and you get paid 1 cent or 2 cents or 20, and you set your price, And it's a method of, it's like that street performer with that little, tip jar right in front of him. You like it, drop in a quarter.
Exactly. But let me introduce something that most males don't notice, and this is not to be sexist in any way, something called Pinterest, right? And
It's funny how you mentioned that, how massive they are, and I totally, yeah, no, they're huge.
And I'm being facetious. I think it's a brilliant, beautiful product. But again, if you go around the rest of this country and outside the tech centers, Pinterest is probably of more value and as a social network mechanism to a majority of females than almost anything, including Facebook. And the reason is there is such an easy way to share and such an easy way to identify people who resonate, at least situationally, with some of your ideas about fashion, design, culture, whatever. But imagine the monetization platform of payments inside of Pinterest, like we're talking about. If I was sitting with a hoard of cash, like maybe Mark, and I haven't either tried to create or acquire Pinterest, certainly I'm sure somebody over in San Francisco in the Tenderloin district is thinking about it. I mean, the bottom line is that's going to be profoundly important for the kind of commerce we're talking about. A pin is actually much more profoundly important to a business than even a like. If that platform was equally in size to Facebook or Twitter, well, it's actually in some ways bigger, already larger than Twitter in its amplification. Imagine the monetization of that is. I know businesses that were essentially invented to be on Pinterest and are doing phenomenal. These are Etsy type of businesses. And there's an affinity between Etsy and Pinterest, by the way. I think that's pretty profound too, which is almost, in some ways, almost an eBay PayPal type of relationship. If you look at the incarnation, removing the payments element, right? If Pinterest actually monetized correctly, or maybe by merging with an Etsy, you would see that sort of symbiosis in a modern.
Well, actually,
context.
Brian, this is big news as of late. The Pinterest first paid ads came out only in May 12th. So
the 12th,
yeah. So once that starts happening, it's going to be inevitable.
A perspective that maybe many miss is just think about China, the population of China, and that's like 1 billion people curating stuff on the internet, just curating day in and day out, and they don't get paid for it.
Yes.
And if you think of a mechanism of paying for it, you can imagine how vastly it'll change the fabric of the internet today.
Everything. I mean, the entire economy.
From forums to Pinterest to things like Facebook, and sharing funny stuff or even informative stuff on it, from retweets, from search engine results, every single thing. And it's an economy that just doesn't have a currency right now.
So let's jump into this for a minute, because I think this would be interesting for people listening. Faisal, what do you think would be, as the world shifts, right, and the puzzle pieces now align, where are opportunities to jump in and build value on top of this, right? You're not going to compete with Facebook or Pinterest, but where can you, as a startup founder looking for ideas, somewhere where you want to invest your time and attention, what are the tools and the value add that will need to be built?
So one thing I would look at is how, Facebook has its own ecosystem, Twitter its own, Google Plus, for the few thousands people that use it, but anyways, LinkedIn, etc., and Pinterest and so forth. Now, what is a common tie down, a common denominator for all of these? I don't want to go to Facebook and then enter my credit card information just to be able to tip. I don't want to do the same thing with Pinterest. I don't want to do the same thing with Twitter. So give me a native platform where I can go in. For example, let's say I go to my PayPal account. I go to this thing and they say, well, turn on, or like just in Quora, you turn on Facebook, turn on, you click on all these social media icons. And guess what? Suddenly they have payments enabled to it.
Wow, that's a big idea. And almost on top of that, Faisal, what you could do is look at your time on the internet and say, look, if I'm going to contribute knowledge of whatever I know, right, and I'm going to write about it or tweet about it or Facebook or Pinterest, like which one is the most profitable? Where should I spend is it on Quora? Is it on Facebook or Twitter, where you invest your time and attention, and you can only put that in one place at a time, and then you see a ROI. So what if there was a startup that built that back end?
I'll give you an example. The vocal equivalent of Quora is Clarity. Clarity,
right?
You can get paid for it. You put a number, and how many hours you're on the phone or minutes, whatever, you get paid for it. Right now, Quora doesn't have it. Twitter doesn't have it. If I retweet something that is worthwhile, and someone says, hey, if I'm going to favorite it, or I could say it, I'll retweet it, but if you want to favorite it, guess what? It'll cost you a cent.
Yeah, there's so many ways to approach this. I mean,
and 1 cent is nothing. It's nothing,
I wouldn't even go to a penny. I think it's a profound importance to have a payment system that is microcents, nanotransactions. The reason being is the psychological barrier. Even though a penny is not equivalent to something very large, one of the reasons why Dogecoin, Doggycoin has done so well is because it is appearing to be of almost no worth, that you're kind of giving something, and it's wrapped up in a bit of a joke, but in reality you are actually giving something of value. And I think psychologically, if you're going to build these systems and you don't understand the real human drama that's involved in this, and you're just approaching it like a data scientist and say a penny sounds great,
but again, Brian,
you could actually injure it.
Millions of people, hundreds of millions of people, spending hundreds of millions of man hours a day curating information, and there's no method of paying them. I mean, that by itself is such a huge, huge opportunity.
And look at the existing people not solving it. Right?
Yeah, but I do, Faisal, to that, I would say anything that inherently creates friction in the experience probably wouldn't be, I would imagine, the way these companies go. Rather, they'll say, I want each user to walk away from their 5-minute experience with my application and say, it was much better. I enjoyed it much more. It was a richer experience because of this new payment experience, right? I don't think it'll be like, I had to pay.
Maybe it's one of those things, where it's down the road and they figured, let's say Facebook has figured it out, right? Let's say Pinterest has figured it out. Maybe just waiting for the right time, and they say, well, the right time would probably be, let's say, 3 years down the road, and because of certain things, and if then else kind of a thing. If this would happen, then this would happen, and then this thing will take off. Maybe they're waiting for that thing to happen. I don't know what that is.
Well, Mike, what do you see? I mean, what do you see the convergence of the Pinterest and Facebook sort of monetization? Do you think advertising is this really the low hanging fruit, and that's just the direction?
No, I think advertising is the obvious fruit, right? Like the ad where Pinterest are going to have ads on top of it. There's early companies like Hello Society that essentially aggregate the relationships between the top 250 pinners, and then when Gucci or Nike comes around, they say, hey, we want to promote to these people, just like on Twitter with I believe it was Adly beforehand.
Yeah.
They'll shut them down, like Twitter shut the other company down and built it internally. Maybe they'll work together, but there'll be some transition to building out the business ad platform, right? Facebook did the same thing. They all will. I think the more interesting approach is saying once payments become so ubiquitous in these companies, you'll have the ability to walk away with an experience that is better because you were able to purchase something that you couldn't have otherwise done easily through other platforms. Like if you want to buy something very small, like say, a toothbrush holder, right? Like Quirky is a company that makes all these cool little toys. What if people post them on Twitter and you could instantly purchase them there, right? So you boost economies across the board that make interesting products that you can deliver the message to people and pay for it right there and then have it shipped to your house. I think that's sort of the end game. But to Faisal's point, expanding on that, I think the opportunities, like the $1 billion opportunities that are kind of ingrained in here, is if I'm a contributor of content, I want a back-end system to compare all of these platforms together. I want to know what's my ROI on an hour of work on Twitter versus Quora versus Pinterest, right? I'm gonna bring my value there, and I want to know like how much am I going to get paid. And I think that's where you start to see like true market equality in a way, right? You start to actually see like Twitter now has a prime focus on becoming valuable for people in a monetization way. And you probably in the future you probably won't think of it as money, right? We constantly think of it like as money. It'll just be like value exchange.
I would like an aggregated payment basket, so to speak. I would work 10 different channels on social media, And, at the end of the day, I can see, well, Facebook generated so much income for me. Twitter did so much.
Yeah, and huge. And
so
Faisal,
much.
the other thing on top of it is, everyone's different. There's not just one answer for payments. Maybe Quora has a 2.8% better ROI on all of your effort than Pinterest, right? But if you're into shoes and if you want to contribute and build a reputation around shoes, maybe Twitter and Pinterest and a bit of Snapchat is the way to go. Like
Well, I think the first thing is accepting that there is an opportunity. The second thing is you have to be cognizant that not a single solution will work. So you'll probably have a generic model and then break it down to further different models and so forth. No one solution is going to fit it all.
Mm-hmm. And you can't really equate what relationships are worth also. I mean, we're talking about monetization, but there is that nebulous aspect of, what is your magnification and what is your broadcast range within these various networks. I mean, if you look at Twitter and you look at a power user like Mark Andreessen, he came out of nowhere, used it not at all for most of his existence, and then just the last, I think, 7 months, does essentially what is called a tweet storm, right? And that is a numbered tweet. Now, you have to ask yourself, here's a very, very bright individual, a great investor. Why is he reduced to breaking down his messages into, 5, 6 different, 12 different parts? That's number one. Number two, how valuable has Twitter become to Mark Andreessen, right? That's right. So you have to say, is that a form of monetization? What is the relationships that he is building with all of these people that could be potential entrepreneurs? There might be somebody 16 right now following Mark, just saying this is great, and he drops out of Stanford after he gets himself a scholarship, shows up and it's because of that impact.
But I think that's what gets people to stay on, right? That's like the kick. Sure. Like when you talk about the sprinkles on top, I think how to monetize and how to make money and like the additional experience, you have to have those relationships. You're never going to monetize those. But what you can do is have products built on top where people actually can exchange value.
Exactly. But the element that I'm trying to get to, I guess, is that it's the users that build this. It's not just necessarily the content. Mark is a good example of somebody who has a high profile within tech, but probably less of a higher profile outside of tech. They might say that was a Netscape guy and maybe dismiss him as something in the past and not really know his most recent accolades. This type of thing allows for, well, if you look at us on Quora, all of us have certainly magnified our capability within that platform. Outside of Quora, well, maybe that's extending also. I certainly have found, situations in my life where it has. Now, how do you equate that into? Do you stay on that platform? Do you build on that platform? And what shifts? What made the first round of Quora Elite leave? There was that Generation 1, which had some huge Silicon Valley well-known individuals in there that slowly, gentrified out of Quora. And you could say that is also the case within Twitter.
Sure, natural social changes.
So what makes people leave? What makes people stay? What's the reward feedback system? And can that be monetized? Because that's sort of an inversion of this, right? Because, all right, yes, if you promote a product, you're getting a 1-for-1. But what is it as the platform owner? What is that monetization mechanism that makes a producer of information or knowledge stay on that platform? And how do you feed that monetization back? And that's a tough equation. I think some of the greatest minds in the world are starting to work on that, but very true. You don't have a long runway on that, right?
Very true.
And speaking of greatest minds in the world, do you know that Visa just introduced what is called a buy button, a checkout button? What do you think about that?
I think it's very interesting. I think we're dealing with a different Visa. Most of the time, Visa.
So explain how exactly this works, right? Break us down a little bit.
So it's no different like a PayPal checkout button or an Amazon checkout button, except this is powered by Visa itself, not by the acquiring bank, not by a specific bank, not by a particular set of financial institutions, just by Visa itself. And the question that begs to be asked is, another payment option, what will it do for the existing merchants? Will there be enough merchant adoption? Will this sort of overlap or be, overlap with the existing payment systems like PayPal? I mean, the CEO, Charles Scharf, called PayPal an important partner to Visa. Yeah. But, that was a statement that he had to sort of make just to
calm the waters.
Pacify people, But it's a very interesting thing. Visa entering it directly. Do they see huge enough market that they feel that they have to enter directly, and rather than partnering up with banks and ensuring that they market it and so forth down the stream?
Sounds like their decision to become actually the technology company, right? Like the value add service on top of Visa. Visa wants to build now, and you're a partner before you're a competitor. But it sounds like they're going in that direction, which to me is very intelligent, because that is the next frontier, right? The payment backend system is essentially built. Visa's already, made billions every year off that. But what if they had the front end where they just essentially cut out or provide an alternative for other guys in the front end?
See, Visa had the Visa wallet. How many of you have it? I would assume that none of you have it.
Well, I do have it, but that's only because I'm a payments nerd. But
right, but do you use it?
No,
of course not. Of course not.
So again, what will this button do? VMe is there, but will this button really change lives, or is it? It's a very small experiment that they're doing. Bigger than Facebook, but smaller on Visa's scale, though.
It's a deep philosophical shift, and I'll give a quick overview of history. Visa was a nonprofit organization run by the major issuing banks. Literally, Visa would wind up with no profits at the end of the year, as distributed to the holding banks, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, et cetera. Chase Bank. When they were sued by Walmart, they were forced to become public companies as a defensive move. It became much easier to manage a company. Also, let it look less like a bunch of guys in a cigar smoke-filled room making decisions on interchange. The first shot fired, and this is a big warning shot. I gave a number of talks to my industry and people outside the industry, was when Visa acquired a company called Authorize.net. They were the Stripe of their era. They were a very, very cutting-edge payment gateway company. They became lethargic. When Visa bought them, they were on the trajectory of a straight line, possibly going down. The innovation stopped happening in that company, and that allowed Braintree and Stripe and Balanced to overtake some elements of the market. Certainly not all. Authorize.net is still the de facto payment gateway. You go to a shopping cart, it already has Authorize.net built in. That's a Visa company. So when that happened, that was Visa cutting out all of the infrastructure that they had built. These were ISOs, these were banks, the entire reseller channel, everything was cut through.
DSPs.
Exactly. What we're doing now with the buy button, and by the way, they're doing this with some of the very large merchants.
Neiman Marcus, Pizza Hut, so forth.
They're cutting out all of the relationships, and they're saying you can deal with us directly. Now, when I was instructing a lot of payment startups, especially ones that had
do you think that has some reflection on what happened with Target as well?
Maybe tangentially, you could say that this had some of that, but I think it's more the fact that you awaken the sleeping giant, and this is what I've always told.
And the sleeping giant doesn't want any, payment service provider to be there.
Well, they don't. Listen, if you own the land, I use the landlord analogy. I think it's the easiest one to understand. If you own the land, you let people kind of play with it for a while. If you don't know what you want to do with it, you let somebody farm it here, somebody builds condos there. But you always tell them that you have a lease. But in this case, you don't tell them how long that lease is. And I would go to companies like PayPal and Square and Stripe, and I'd sit down and say, what would happen if Visa did what you were doing? And unfortunately, everybody would always take that sort of giggle and say, oh, they can't compete with us. I go, listen, this is exactly what everybody thought the king would do in Ireland, right? They could never kick us off the land. And it in fact happened. And this is kind of the beginning of that. Visa is now looking at the world as a technology company more and more. They're hiring people in that space. In fact, they're taking a lot of the technologists from some of these companies, some that they've even invested in, which is profoundly interesting. and they sit on the boards of these companies, or they sit around the boards and they listen to what their ideas are. And look what Howard Schultz did. I mean, look at if you look at what's going on, Howard is now opening up. This is a little quick aside here, ordering through the Starbucks app, and everybody said they're never going to do that. They didn't get it right. The end game is the complete relationship, delivery, ordering, the whole thing. They're going to own it. They're going to sell it to other companies. Apple, Amazon's down that road. But anyway, Visa is just starting down this path. This is on an online mode, but I believe very quickly you'll start seeing it manifest in retail. And all of a sudden, what we were doing with our smartphones in some ways will look kind of cobbled, because Visa has the profound power to jump over many of the barriers that were not technological, but Visa imposed. These are barriers that are related to PCI, security, tokenization, the movement of numbers back and forth. If Visa opens up a rate case on the interchange, which allows a cost to be dramatically lower because this form of payment technology is being used over another form, and they happen to be in control of that, it's not a monopoly. They'll say anybody else can do it, but Visa happens.
And honestly, I would question whether they're going to do it better. I think anytime you see a company like Visa come out with their own experience on the developer side or the user side, quite frankly, many times it's just subpar and it fails.
Doesn't matter, Mike. Here's the problem. Here's the problem. They can do something subpar. If you look at the most popular,
right? But Authorize.net is a perfect example, Brian. Right, where Authorize.net is a complete downward sinking ship at this point because the experience is much better on Stripe, Balanced, or Braintree.
There's no doubt,
they'll have massive adoption early on, but then eventually. But it
was an ugly stepchild that they had. They didn't really bring it into the fold. What I'm trying to say is, if you look at the most popular vehicles on the road, they're not the best vehicles. Not everybody's driving a Tesla. People ultimately, and business owners ultimately, make a practical and pragmatic decision, and sometimes it is based primarily on affordability and finance. So if you have this ultimate
price is certainly a factor.
That's right. If you have this ultimately nicely curated, perfectly designed, the corners are rounded on the perfect radius type of app, and then you have Visa's kind of kludgy type of thing, but the merchant is getting a really big benefit and the consumer is getting a benefit for using it. All of a sudden, Visa can
exactly.
shunt, just like a railroad, majority of traffic.
On the same note that Visa's traveling down a new path, what do you think about New York's Department of Financial Services having released a framework for the BitLicense?
Very, very big deal.
Wow, that's a huge deal.
Yeah, what it first
and also the same week, Dell announcing that they are now also going to be accepting Bitcoins.
I don't think that's coincidental either, by the way. I think they needed signaling on that. But it's a very big deal because it establishes a platform of negotiation. I think whenever you see regulators.
So what is it? Well, before we jump in, what exactly? What are they doing when they say a bit license?
So they've released a framework that is basically a money transmitter license framework for Bitcoins, and they call it BitLicense.
Yes.
The only thing that is so essentially different is they've taken into account the digital aspect and digital nature of the transaction, meaning they've made requirements that you have a chief information security officer. They've made requirements that you sort of get a penetration test done on your systems. They've made a requirement that your digital assets must be adequately protected, et cetera, et cetera. But on the whole, not different from a regular state money transmitter license. So they will be, one thing I'm going to say it out right now, and this is just going against New York's DFS. They said 90 days you'll have this, and 90 days, that's all BS. Nothing happens in New York in 90 days. I'm going to say it out right now. So any application that anyone will put in, expect, good 9 months to maybe a year before you get your application out.
But this is separate than what happened recently with Jerry Brown in California. This is not the recognition. This is for companies to. Go ahead.
This one is going to sort of replicate now in other states, most likely, who've taken a no action or who've sort of said, Bitcoin is something that we don't allow right now in the MTL. And they will most likely replicate it and use a cookie cutter and say, well, voila, state of Vermont now has a BitLicense as well. So does state of Texas and everyone else.
There might be an upsetter into that. California might approach it differently. But let's go back to what it really is. What it essentially is doing is it's allowing businesses to legally operate in the state of New York Basically, one could speculate that you can operate outside the state of New York and just not have any New York residents or businesses, but obviously because of the population densities, et cetera, you have to adhere. The downside to it in a lot of creative startup world is that it requires high capitalization and no fractionalization. All right. When you put money in a bank, the bank can fractionalize it and essentially not have all the money on deposit. What New York is saying very clearly that if you have $100 worth of Bitcoin, you have to always have on file $100 of Bitcoin. It must be protected, and you must have surety bonds to guarantee that. This is going to be a huge cost to bear for some companies, because essentially what it's doing is it's requiring a much larger capital formations to even begin to start Bitcoin.
The net worth and the surety bonds, and not to mention the permissible investments. So all these things would be have to looked at, and as you add agents to it, oh my God, So it's going to be an expensive proposition. Some of the aspiring Bitcoin businesses will probably be left out.
Some of the very largest ones love it because it has the effect that money transmitter licenses have always had, and that is it rolls up the sidewalk so that only the very money could actually enter the business. Now, there's reasons for that, because you don't want your grandma to invest in Bitcoin and then all of a sudden it gets goxed. Mt. Gox is gone and the money's gone, and turns out that they were maybe fractionalizing it and betting against funds. You don't want to see that happen. And so it's creating some uniformity. I think the next shoe to drop in New York is NASDAQ listings, and I believe that that's going to come by the end of the summer. That will make Bitcoin rapidly spiral to the moon, because there's only so much Bitcoin. NASDAQ will expand the market reach, and institutional investors, even if just one institutional investor participated, they can swap up the entire daily transaction volume in a few seconds. So it's opening the doors to that. California is going to take a slightly different approach, and I know this from people I've talked to that are trying to draft some of these rules. They want to make it a lot easier for different stages of companies to be involved. They want entrepreneurial activity much more, and they want to actually dissuade the power from being in the hands of the people who already have the power. Some within California knows that at some point the Western Unions of the world and the other money transmitters will jump on this, and then they're going to want to roll up the sidewalks even more, that you have to have $1 trillion available on deposit before you touch Bitcoin. I mean, all of a sudden it becomes something different. So it is a give and take. This is a discovery period for New York. The 90 days we're talking about is really about comments. Now, some may say it's a foregone conclusion. I happen to think that there's a lot of open minds with the framers of this legislation, regulation, if you will. And I think some of the very draconian aspects might be watered down a bit. And I think you may even see a bit of a hinge open up for smaller companies to participate, certainly at the same level of protection, but possibly not as much scrutiny. There is a big X factor. It's not fully determined, nor will it maybe ever, how much money you must have as insurance, if you will, to operate a Bitcoin company. That is a big X factor.
Well, one thing is that all the states on the surety bonds sort of cap out at $2 million. So there is hardly a state that says, well, just because you're doing $100 million in trading, I want your surety bond to be $100 million. No,
we're hoping
have to cap out at $2 million. So
we're hoping it follows that pattern, right? But again, if it becomes an actual listed commodity or listed trading vehicle on NASDAQ, it's no tell where that's going to go. And I really believe that's the direction. That's one of the reasons why it's moving so quickly.
Barring the surety bond, they will probably require dollar for dollar value of your net outstanding transactions to be measured, to be matched with your net worth.
Oh, there's probably no doubt about that. Yeah, and probably more so. There's going to be some stumbles on this. There'll be some reinterpretations, and I think the more let's say libertarian side of the Bitcoin community is very dismayed by it, and I understand that aspect. The very conservative banker individual is very dismayed by it because now it's official that Bitcoin is not going to be regulated out of existence. And we've talked about this for the last year, basically, right? It's just everybody on the anti-Bitcoin side. Oh no, it'll never become legal in the United States first, and then it'll be deregulated. You know, that's all done. Now we're over that. Now it's more of the aspect of if Bitcoin or algorithmic currencies and digital currencies are going to be used as a container for some other value other than monetary units, how will these rules affect it? So if I am using Bitcoin for nothing more than, evidence of an insurance policy or other forms of contract, which is where a lot of the innovation is going to come from, how do these rules impact that? This is part of the problem, is that you're trying to regulate a technology that has almost an infinite number of use cases. And if I call it Bitcoin, all of a sudden, or digital currency, all of a sudden now I got to do all these things. But if I don't call it that and I'm just using the blockchain, I'm using the public ledger, how are they going to regulate that? You see, this becomes a very difficult piece of jelly to try to nail to the wall. And when I'm asked for my advice by a lot of the people that are doing research for the regulators and legislators, I bring this up and they get very quiet. They're like, I don't understand that aspect and how we can regulate it. I'm saying, no, you can't, because you can't possibly predict the use cases. So if you're only going to get very mono view of this, that it's just a currency, it's just a value transfer, you handle it like that, that's what human beings do. We categorize and we put things into nice little neat packets and we say, okay, that's what it is. But the world and the universe and nature just says, okay, well, I'm something else. I'm going to morph out of that. And I don't see where they can go now. In a sense, they've painted themselves in a corner with the regulation, because in some ways it is going to limit creativity. And in other ways, it's going to cause a profound explosion outside of the fences that they have erected.
Very true.
And this is true with anything on the internet. So it's going to be an interesting time. I think California actually was trying to force New York to move first. And it's a bit of a one-upmanship from state to state. You'll see other states get involved.
All right. We'll end with this last question. What do you guys think out of the earlier conversation we had between Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, etc.? Which company will be transacting, and just give me a name of a company, of the greatest total volume of in-app or in-product payments in the next year?
Facebook.
Facebook. There's no doubt about it. Yeah. In 10 years,
David Marcus. That's the answer.
David Marcus. just David Marcus.
I don't think we'll even be talking about Pinterest or Twitter in 10 years from now. Those companies will exist in some form. They'll probably be parts of other companies.
Pinterest, you think you're short on Pinterest, Brian?
No. I'm very long on Pinterest. I think what Pinterest will, if the current
acquisition target,
or they will acquire, if they are guided with the right mindset, Pinterest could be equally as large as Facebook. It won't be called Pinterest necessarily, because I think that's a limiting.
Great name.
Facebook pictures.
Pictures of Facebook. But I think the short form communication social network idea
Brian,
is too
you don't use Twitter.
No.
Why not?
Because I'm a very verbose individual.
Okay.
And I
there
rebel.
you go.
And I rebel against 140 characters, and I mean, it's psychological, but it's even more complex than that. I felt that a lot of the communication, a vast majority, if not 99% of it in the early days, was pointless.
Well, we got it. One day we'll have to get you back on there, but
you may
till
pull
next
me
time.
I'll do a Mark Andreessen
a firestorm. That's what you got to do, Brian. See, he just taught you to tweet storm. Just open up.
Tweet one of 194.
Yeah.
It'd be in the thousands. I need 16 digits there, but I'll just start using credit card numbers. But it's going to be interesting.
All right, guys.
I got to leave it with this one point. I'm not anti any of these companies. I think I'm just anti some of the policies that wind up being adopted like it's a holy grail and that humans don't evolve. I think that's really the big point I want to leave with everybody. It's not a company. I mean, I love Twitter. I have a lot of friends that work over there and stuff, and it's more that I'm trying to see if they can expand their mind a little bit, because they do have an amazing platform and the ability to grow.
Well, guys,
Agreed.
great show. Thank you for discussing all the topics. We'll connect next week. Till then, have a good one.
See ya. This one flew by.
Great week.
See ya.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.